They asked me to cross a line I couldn't uncross. At the time, it didn't feel reckless. It felt contained. I'd been living abroad for years, building a life that worked precisely because it didn't ask much from me. Part 1. The arrangement. I never talked about this because the moment you say it out loud, people stop listening to why and start judging what. But at the time, it didn't feel reckless. It felt contained. I'd been living abroad for years by then, long enough to build a life that worked precisely because it didn't ask much from me. I had routines, familiar places, and relationships that stayed light. I wasn't lonely in the dramatic sense. I was intentional. I didn't want complications. I didn't want futures. I wanted connection without weight. That's how I justified it. I met them through the quiet overlap that happens in cities where expats, money, and transients mix easily. They were older, married, wealthy, and calm in a way that suggested control rather than passion. From the beginning, everything about them felt structured. The husband spoke clearly, without hesitation, like someone used to framing situations before anyone else had the chance to misunderstand them. The wife spoke less. When she did, it was measured. She smiled often, not flirtatiously, but politely, like someone who had learned how to keep things smooth. When the husband asked if I had ever been involved with a couple before, it didn't sound provocative. It sounded logistical. I paused, not because I was shocked, but because I was checking myself for alarm. I expected discomfort. I expected something in my body to reject the idea. Instead, I felt curiosity. That was the first warning sign, though I didn't recognize it as one yet. He explained the arrangement carefully. No drama, no emotional expectations. They traveled often. When they were in town, they liked to enjoy themselves. Everything was consensual. Everything was clear. The way he spoke made it feel less like an invitation and more like an offer with terms already agreed upon. I realized quickly that this wasn't about entering their marriage. It was about stepping into a system they already controlled. And that made it easier. The first time happened in a hotel, clean, quiet, detached from real life. We talked first. That mattered to me. I've always believed intimacy, in any form, should involve some humanity. Afterward, we stayed in the room longer than expected. It wasn't awkward. It was strangely calm. Water glasses on the table. Air conditioning is too cold. The outside world is distant. What surprised me most was the absence of guilt. Nothing was demanded from me. No follow-up. No expectations. No emotional negotiations. I left, and my life continued exactly as it had before. That's how it stayed for years. They traveled. Sometimes months passed. Sometimes they messaged when they were back in Jakarta. Always polite. Always contained. It felt like they were borrowing me briefly, then returning me untouched. I told myself that was the healthiest part. I liked that it didn't invade my life. I liked that it didn't require explanation. I liked that it stayed invisible. And invisibility, when it's comfortable, is easy to normalize. Part 2. The offer. Over time, I learned the rules without them ever being stated. Don't overlap. Don't create risk. Don't become visible. Once, I saw them at a public dinner, laughing like any other couple. They didn't see me, or pretended not to. Walking past them, I felt something tighten in my chest. Not jealousy, recognition. I wasn't a participant in their public life. I was a secret. Still, the arrangement continued. And because nothing went wrong, I convinced myself nothing could go wrong. Then the husband messaged me before one of their visits and said he wanted to see me more often. Not only when they were in Jakarta, he offered to cover expenses, flights, hotels. He framed it as convenience, as appreciation. At first, it sounded flattering, like trust, but something about it unsettled me. Expanding the arrangement meant expanding the container, and containers don't expand without consequences. When we met again, everything felt familiar, until it didn't. Afterward, in that quiet space where conversations usually stayed light, the husband sat back and said he wanted to make an offer. He spoke slowly, deliberately. They wanted a child. He said they had tried for years. Quietly, carefully. It hadn't happened. He didn't want the process to feel clinical. He wanted it to feel natural. Then he looked at me and said he trusted me. The room went still. He explained it calmly. like a plan. They would take care of everything. There would be compensation, support, discretion. If it worked, he said, they would take care of me even more. I felt something inside me shift, from curiosity to alarm. For years, the arrangement worked because it was temporary, because it left no trace. A child would change that. I imagined the future unfolding quietly. A child who would never know me. A child who might someday notice they didn't quite fit the story they were given. They were Chinese. I'm not. I imagined the explanations, the silences, the careful management. And I imagined myself years later, living another life, knowing a person existed because of a decision I made in a hotel room. Even if no one ever said my name. The money didn't soften that thought. I asked for time. The husband nodded easily, as if he expected that, as if refusal wasn't something he was seriously considering. Then I looked at the wife. For the first time, I saw something unpracticed on her face. Hope. And hope doesn't belong in arrangements. Hope creates futures. That's when I realized this wasn't about generosity. It was about convenience. I was already inside the system. I already knew how to stay invisible. That was what they were asking me to give. Part 3. The weight of knowing. I left that night feeling like the city had changed temperature. Nothing around me was different, but something inside me had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. For years, I believed the arrangement was harmless because it stayed contained. Now containment felt like an illusion. I kept asking myself questions I couldn't answer. What does a man owe when his silence helps build a family? What does responsibility look like when it's never acknowledged? What kind of absence shapes a child? I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel moral superiority. I felt the weight of knowing. The offer stayed with me, unresolved. Not because I was tempted by the money, though I won't pretend it didn't matter, but because it forced me to confront something I'd avoided for years. Those clean compartments only work until something living enters them. And once you're asked to help create a life, you don't get to pretend you're just passing through anymore. I still haven't answered them. Maybe that's the answer. Or maybe it's just a delay disguised as reflection. All I know is this. Some offers don't reveal who the other people are. They reveal who you are and who you're willing to become. And once you see that clearly, there's no way to make the decision feel light again. Have you ever been offered something that forced you to question who you'd be if you said yes?